This conference will now be recorded.
In today's session, we'll try to understand about one service in AWS, that is EC2. Right? As I already told, AWS is offering lot of services. There are various services, like 200 plus services are available approximately in AWS. Right? So if you see AWS list of services, which you can see, you have plenty of services available in AWS. Okay? There are various services that are available in AWS, and each services, right, is going to offer some different kind of use cases. In AWS, you have approximately like 100, like 200 plus services. If you see, once you log into the AWS also, right, you can see there are various services available. For different use cases. If you see in the top right corner, this left corner, you can see there are compute related services like EC2. EC2 is one of the service in AWS. Compute related services like EC2, you have Elastic Beanstalk, Lambda, right? AWS App Runner, like this. And we have something storage related services. We have storage related services like EFS, S3, Glacier, Amazon FSx. And similarly, you have something related to networking like VPC, AWS VPC, Route 53, Direct Connect. There are plenty of services, storage related, network related, compute related, container related, database related, IoT, machine learning, right? Artificial intelligence and machine learning. Based on your use case, there is no fixed answer that what services we are going to use in our organization. There is no fixed answer for that. Whatever requirement you have. Suppose you need a containerized application, you want to deploy and manage your applications as a containers. There are containerized related services. Examples, you have EKS, Elastic Kubernetes Service. You have Elastic Container Service, ECS. You have ECR, Elastic Container Registry, right? Suppose you want to go with some storage, you need a storage to store and maintain some data. Storage related services like EBS, EFS, S3, FSx, Glacier, storage related. Network related services like a VPC, DNS, and this Route 53. You have a AWS Direct Connect. You have CDN, CloudFront. Suppose you need to work on some machine learning and artificial intelligence. There are some services available for machine learning and artificial intelligence. You can use lot of services for machine learning and artificial intelligence. Suppose you want to work on IoT, Internet of Things, right? There are lot of services available. Databases. Suppose you want to go with managed databases. You have RDS, you have DynamoDB, you have Cache, Elastic Cache. Like this, you have hundreds of services available in AWS as per your requirement. Whatever use case you want to develop or whatever you want to do as per your application requirement, you can go for any service which matches your requirement. Is everyone clear on that one? Suppose you are working on big data and big data. There are big data related services, right? Hadoop and big data related services. If you are working on AI, artificial intelligence, there are related services. So there are hundreds of services available if you go with any cloud platform. Primarily, they are categorized into compute, like a servers, containers, kind of a containers and Kubernetes, and databases, managed databases like DynamoDB, Elastic Cache, RDS, these things. So storage related services, security and compliance related services, we have various services. AWS is offering lot of services, lot of resources which you can create and use. So EC2 is one of the service. EC2 is one of the service which we will use to create machines, create a virtual machines. So let's get into the EC2. So what is EC2? What is the full form of EC2? So EC2 is Elastic Compute Cloud. It's a virtual machine. It's a VM. It's a virtual machine in AWS cloud. It's a virtual machine in AWS cloud. It provides a scalable computing capacity. EC2 provides scalable computing capacity. Scalable computing capacity. What do you mean by scalable computing capacity? I hope you can understand. Scalable. Based on the changes in my demand, based on the changes in my needs, I can increase and decrease the capacity of the servers, right? So you can do horizontal scaling, you can do vertical scaling also. You can do horizontal scaling and you can do vertical scaling. So if it is vertical scaling, you are going to change the capacity of the instance. You are going to change the instance type of the existing server. You are going to change the instance type. You are going to change the instance type of the existing server so that you can increase or decrease the capacity of the computing power, CPU and memory. That is vertical. Horizontal in the sense you are going to replicate or duplicate with same configurations. You are going to create a one more server, that is horizontal scaling. So EC2 provides scalable computing capacity. EC2, it's a virtual machine in the cloud. EC2 is a virtual machine in the cloud, AWS cloud. EC2 provides scalable computing capacity in the cloud. EC2 launch, you can use EC2 to launch as many servers as required or as few servers as required based on your requirement. Suppose you need a servers for applications, you need a servers for database, you need a servers for reverse proxy. We can create as many servers as required or as few servers as required using EC2. So you can configure a security, networking, and we can manage the storage of the EC2. EC2 enables you to scale up, scale down to handle the changes in the requirement. You can scale up, scale down EC2 to handle the changes in your requirements. As I told, you can do vertical scaling or you can do horizontal scaling of your EC2 instances. So it's a virtual machine in AWS cloud. So if you conceptually understand our EC2 instance with normal computer, if you take any normal computer, normal server also, we have a OS, right? We have an operating system. We have an OS. Any computer or any server you take, you have a OS, operating system. And you have your system, your server will have a CPU, RAM. RAM is nothing but memory. And it will have a hard disk. It will have a hard disk. It will have a firewall and IP addresses, right? So if you take any normal server or computer also, that computer will have a operating system OS and compute power CPU and memory, hard disk, that is basically a storage. If you understand the conceptually these computer components with our EC2 instance components also, EC2 instance, when we are creating EC2 instance, we are going to use several components to create a EC2. We use something called AMI. We use something called AMI. So AMI stands for in EC2 we call it as a AMI. This AMI stands for what basically? This AMI stands for Amazon machine Amazon machine image. Amazon machine image. So we have something called AMI, that Amazon machine image. What is that AMI? Right, Amazon machine image. It's a pre-configured package. This Amazon machine image, it's a pre-configured package. Pre-configured package. What package? OS package. Basically, operating system. It's a pre-configured package to launch in the sense to create a pre-configured package to launch EC2 instances. So it contains, basically that AMI contains operating system, OS, operating system, OS, and some basic softwares and settings. It's a pre-configured package, AMI. It's a pre-configured package to launch instances. It contains operating system and some basic softwares and settings. In normal computer terminology, we call it as operating system. In AWS, that is basically AMI. Your AMI contains some OS, some operating system, and some software settings. So whenever we are creating a EC2 instance, we need to select or we need to provide using which AMI you want to create a server. Whether you are manually creating via GUI, or CLI, or whether you guys are using some kind of a cloud formation templates or Terraform also. When you are creating a EC2 instances using Terraform infrastructure as a code, that time also you need to mention the AMI. Using what AMI you want to create a EC2 instance. It's a pre-configured package to launch instances. It contains operating system and some other basic softwares and settings. So again, there are types of AMIs. I hope you guys already know. We are just refreshing AWS concepts here. We are not discussing again. So we are refreshing already whatever has been discussed, if you guys already know also. So there are types of AMIs. What are the types of AMIs we have, guys? What types of AMIs we have, which we guys already discussed also? Primarily, they are categorized into three: community AMIs, marketplace AMI, and my AMI. So community AMIs, marketplace AMIs, my AMI. So community AMI, generally it contains only OS, with some free or basic binaries. Generally it contains only OS. When it comes to marketplace AMIs, again when it comes to community AMIs, there are different again Linux, Windows, and Mac also. Again within Linux, right? Within this Linux, you have different Linux AMIs again. So you have something called Red Hat AMI, Amazon Linux AMI, Ubuntu AMI, Debian AMI, CentOS AMI, SUSE Linux. Like this, you have various Community AMIs generally contains only OS, like Red Hat, Amazon Linux, Ubuntu, Debian, CentOS, SUSE Linux, or Windows or Mac OS, like that. It contains only OS, community AMIs. And this marketplace AMIs generally contains, it contains, it contains some OS with additional licensed software, additional licensed softwares in the marketplace AMI. And my AMI, this is my AMI. What do you mean by my AMI? You can create your own AMI. You can create your own AMI with some OS and pre-configured softwares, pre-configured settings. You can create your own AMI also. You can create your own AMI also. Community AMIs generally contains only OS. Marketplace AMIs contains OS with some additional licensing software. My AMIs, in the sense, you can create your own AMI. You can create your own AMI, kind of your own template, your kind of your own OS template, your kind of a own OS template, in which you can have some OS. You can create your own AMI with some OS and required softwares and configurations. With required softwares and configurations, you can create your own AMI. You can create your own AMI with some OS and required softwares and configurations also. And if you guys are using that AMI, if you guys are creating your own AMI with some OS and required softwares and configurations, if I am using that AMI to create a EC2 instances, that instances will have that OS plus whatever softwares and configurations you have done while creating your own AMI. So there are various ways to create a AMIs also, your own AMI. One is you can use existing EC2 instance also. From existing EC2 instance, right, you can create a AMI. Suppose you already have one server. Suppose you already have one server, one EC2 instance. In that EC2 instance, you might have installed some software like Java and a Tomcat, like that. And from that EC2 instance, if you create a AMI, that AMI will have a OS plus that softwares also. Using that AMI, if I create a server with my own AMI, will I have that server will have that OS plus whatever softwares and configurations is done as part of that AMI? Yes. So you can create your own AMI also from existing EC2 instance with required softwares and configurations using existing EC2 instance. Otherwise, you can use, there is one more software. There is one more software from HashiCorp, that is HashiCorp Packer. Using Packer, right, you can build AMIs. You can build AMIs using HashiCorp Packer. So using HashiCorp Packer, you can create your own AMIs, and that AMIs can be used to create the servers in cloud. So is everyone clear the types of AMIs? The types of AMIs, community AMI, marketplace AMI, my AMI. Guys, all these things are nothing to do with Terraform. All these things are nothing to do with Terraform. These are cloud concept. But a Terraform, when I am creating a Terraform, if I have to create a EC2 instance, right? Do I need to provide all these details in my Terraform script? What type of instance has to be created? What AMI has to be used? Instead of manually creating, you guys are creating using Terraform. That time you have to specify all these details. Without knowing what is cloud, what is that EC2 service, will you able to understand Terraform scripts and work with Terraform? No. So that's why we are discussing all these things. So clear everyone, what is AMI and what type of AMI you have? And again, whenever we are creating a EC2, is AMI is mandatory to select, or is AMI information is mandatory to provide, whether you are creating via GUI Whether you are creating via API or Terraform, whatever it is, yes. So AMI represents some operating system, and AMIs are region specific. Understand, AMIs are region specific. Let me show that. Let me go to EC2. Let me go to EC2 service. If you see here, you have something called images. You have something called images. Don't get confused, these images. These are not Docker images. These are not container images. These are AMIs. AMIs is nothing but a server images, virtual machine images. Using these AMIs, you can create a servers. Now, if you see, if I go to AMI catalog, if I go to AMI catalog, you can see community AMIs, marketplace AMIs, community AMIs, marketplace AMIs. If required, you can create your own AMI also. If required, you can create your own AMI. I don't have any AMI, my own AMI. There is something called community AMIs, marketplace AMIs, my AMI. This quick start AMIs are nothing but the frequently used AMIs. This quick start AMI is nothing but commonly used AMIs. These quick start AMIs are nothing but commonly used AMIs that can be community or marketplace, which are commonly used quick start AMI. If you see community AMIs, you have AMIs like Amazon Linux, Red Hat, SUSE Linux, Ubuntu, Microsoft. This Microsoft is nothing but a Windows. Similarly, you can see Microsoft with various versions also you have, SUSE Linux with various versions you have, and a Mac also you have, Ubuntu, Debian, Red Hat, like this various versions of the AMI. Each AMI will have an ID. Each AMI will have an ID, right? These AMIs are region specific. These AMIs are region specific, which means whatever AMI you have in Mumbai region with same ID, it might not be there in another region. With same ID, the AMI will not be there in another region. But will I have a same AMI? I mean to say, Red Hat AMIs, Ubuntu AMIs, Amazon Linux AMIs in other regions also? Yes, but the ID will be different. The AMI ID will be different. So AMIs are region specific. AMIs are region specific. Why I am saying this one? Suppose in your Terraform script, you are creating a EC2 instance and you are using this AMI ID. Let's consider this AMI ID. In your Terraform script, you will create some resource, right? You will say resource, right? A resource. Just to give an example for now, AWS underscore instance. You are going to say something like this, AWS underscore instance. Here, it is going to expect the AMI ID. AMI ID. Suppose you have given AMI ID like this. Now, same script, if you are executing in a different region, same script, you are executing this in a different region, do you think the server will be created with this AMI ID if this AMI ID is not same in another region? If there is no AMI with this ID, no. So is everyone clear? What is AMI? First of all, AMI IDs are region specific, which means this with same AMI ID, you may not able to find the AMI in another region. Clear? What is AMI? And how many types of AMIs you have? What do you mean by community AMI? What do you mean by marketplace AMI? What do you mean by my AMI? Now marketplace AMI comes with some additional licensing software also. If you see, if I take this AMI, some OS with open VPN software. If I go with this AMI, OS with the Palo Alto firewall software. And if I go with this AMI, right, Splunk enterprise software, Splunk software, licensed software with some OS. So marketplace AMI comes with OS plus some additional licensing software. These are community AMIs, contains only OS. If required, you can create your own AMI using Packer or using any existing EC2 instance also. You can create a AMI. Is everyone clear? What is AMI with respect to EC2 instance? That AMI represents? AMI is a pre-configured package with some OS and basic softwares and settings. Now, if you observe, right, I am in Mumbai region. I am in Mumbai region. Let's say I am trying to select when I am creating EC2, when I am creating a EC2 instance, first and foremost thing you select is AMI. So if you see, you guys are expected to create a Red Hat EC2 instance. You may hard code this AMI ID in your Terraform script, but if you run the same Terraform script in another region, let's say, let me go to maybe Singapore region. Singapore region. If you see, is that AMI ID is same? Let me show that. Now I am in Singapore region. I switch to Singapore region. Now if you see, you have a Red Hat AMI, but is that AMI ID is same? You can see Red Hat Enterprise Linux only, but is that AMI ID is same? Whatever you see in Mumbai and whatever you see in Singapore, no. If this is the case, right, when you try to run the Terraform script against a different region, will it able to create a EC2 instance? No. So you need to understand first, you need to understand resources. First, you need to understand what is cloud resources, how it works. Then, instead of manually creating those resources, you can automate this one using Terraform. You can provision these resources using Terraform. But people expect, right? They want to learn Terraform, but they don't know what is resource. I mean to say, what is that service in cloud? That is where problem is coming. They want to learn Terraform, they want to work on Terraform, but without knowing that resources, that cloud, AWS cloud and AWS resources. Will you guys able to write a Terraform script by understanding what is what? No. Okay. So this is one thing, AMI. Now, if you take normal computer, you have a OS. In AWS, it is AMI. When it comes to normal computer, you have a CPU and memory. You have a CPU and memory. Memory is nothing but a RAM. So how do you measure the performance of your computer, your server? Basically, how do you measure? Based on which components you will have a power. That computing power is based on what? If you take any server or computer or laptop, if you take any server, any computer or any laptop or desktop also, the computing power, the speed of that server is based on what, guys? Based on the CPU, based on the CPU, based on the CPU and memory. That CPU is nothing but a processor, okay? Computing processor. That CPU and memory. So in AWS, they are categorizing your EC2 instances into something called instance types. There is something called instance types, instance family and instance types. So when you guys are creating EC2 instance, you are going to select instance type also. Instance type, you might have selected T2.micro, T2.medium, T2.xlarge, double xlarge, triple xlarge, like that. What is that basically? That is going to determine the hardware of the EC2 instance. So if you see, AWS, right, has something called instance type. AWS has something called instance type. You have a CPU and a RAM. These are based on the CPU and memory. Based on the CPU and RAM, AWS has categorized those into instance families and instance type. There are various instance families: general purpose, compute optimized, general purpose, compute optimized, memory optimized, storage optimized. And again, within each family, there are types: T2.micro, medium, X large, double X large, triple X large, like that. So the power of your computer, the speed, the power of your computer, that EC2 instance in AWS is based on whatever instance type you are selecting. Is everyone clear? Instance type. AWS has a lot of instance types, instance families. If you see, let me go to this instance types. Let me go to this instance types. You see, there are lot of types and again lot of families, right? T2.micro, T2.medium, X large, double X large, based on the CPUs and based on the memory, they have categorized into various families and various types. If you see, you have C family, T family, like that various instance types are there. Approximately how many instance types are there? You can see here itself. How many instance types are there in this region again? Singapore region, let me switch to Mumbai region. Singapore region, they are supporting 459 instance types. In Singapore region, they are supporting 459 instance type. Let me switch to Mumbai. Mumbai region, how many instance type they are supporting here also? Let's see. Here how many instance type in Mumbai region they are supporting? 370 instance types. At high level, right? These instances are categorized into families, EC2 instance types and families. Okay. If you see, these EC2 instances are categorized into multiple families. You have general purpose, provisioned IOPS, like that. You have lot of families, EC2 instance types. Let me select this compute. If you see, let me go to instance types. If you see, they are primarily categorized into some families: general purpose, compute optimized, memory optimized, storage optimized, like this. General purpose. General purpose contains just basically general purpose instances provide balanced compute and balanced memory and networking resources. So there is a balanced CPU, balanced memory and network resources based on your use case. Based on your requirement, you are going to select a instance type and family. Suppose you need more computing power for batch processing, right? More compute intensive applications you want to run for a kind of a batch processing, media transcoding and high performance. You need more computing power. In that case, you can go for a compute optimized. Again, in compute optimized, you have C7 family, C6 family, like that. So this instance types is going to determine the hardware of your EC2 instance, what type of processor it is internally used, and how much CPUs you will get. That is based on the instance types and families. If you go for a memory optimized, you have all these families, right? All these types. So various instance types are there. Each type, again, there are a lot of families. So based on your use case, you are going to select the instance type. So when you have a compute optimized, right? So you will get a more computing power. When you go with memory optimized, the RAM, the memory will be more compared to the compute CPUs. Like this. Is everyone clear? What do you mean by instance type in AWS EC2? Because why I am discussing all these things, you guys want to create a EC2 instance using Terraform, but without knowing what is a EC2, what do you mean by AMI, what do you mean by instance type? So you can't understand all these things, okay? Chandrasekhar, I am telling this is, I am giving AWS resources at a high level. So you are expected to know AWS in detail. Otherwise, you need to understand whatever I am saying here. because Terraform is focused here, not AWS, but I am explaining AWS so that you can easily understand Terraform. So you have a compute optimized, you have a memory optimized, you have a CPU optimized, like that. So compute optimized, more computing power. Computing in the sense compute power. Compute in the sense CPU. You will have a more CPU compared to the memory. Compared to the memory, you can see, right? Is this instance 2 CPUs 4 GB, 16 CPUs 32 GB. If you go for a general purpose, there will be a balanced CPU and balanced memory. When you go for a memory optimized, you have a more memory, more CPUs. Sorry, more memory compared to the CPUs. You can see 16 GB memory, 2 core CPU. So more memory. Storage optimized. Storage optimized. It will give very good IO. Very good IO. What do you mean by IO again? Input output operations per second per GB, which you want to carry. So you want very good performance in reading and writing the data to the disk. Then you can go for a storage optimized instances. So your EC2 instances, the how powerful your EC2 instance is based on the instance type which you guys are selecting. Clear? What do you mean by this instance type? Now, in normal computer, you will call it as a hard disk. Normal computer, you call it as a hard disk. For what purpose we will use that hard disk or storage? For what purpose we will use that hard disk or storage basically? So the hard disk or storage basically you are going to use for booting the OS. You are going to boot, you need a storage where you can boot the OS and to maintain the data to keep the files, right? That can be OS related files, or that can be some application related files or software related files. So you need a storage where it can store and maintain some files. Whenever you are starting the server, it has to boot the OS. Does that server require storage where it can boot the OS? Yes. So in your local computer, in your local laptop or desktop also, do you have a hard disk where it is going to write and store some data, some files? Normal computer or desktop or laptop also, yes. Similarly, EC2 also will have a storage. Similarly, EC2 also will have some storage where it can boot the OS or it can maintain the data. By default, every EC2 instance will have root value. By default, every EC2 instance will have a root value. What do you mean by that root value? For what purpose EC2 will use that root storage, right? The root value is used for booting the OS. The root value will be used for booting the OS. OS will be booted in the root value. If required, you can attach additional values also, additional disks to that EC2 instance. So in AWS, this hard disk, this storage is basically, we are calling that as a EBS. If you guys remember, whenever we create a EC2 in the background, it is using EBS also. EBS as a storage, EBS as a disk. That is basically a block store. That is basically a block storage, right? So every EC2 instance, whenever you are creating a EC2 instance, whenever you are creating a EC2 instance, there will be a root storage where OS will be booted. There will be a root storage where OS will be booted. So it is going to use one more service called EBS. One more service called EBS. Root. In Linux, root is this one. In Linux, root is this one. Suppose you guys are creating Windows servers. Windows servers. What is the root in case of Windows? The storage which is mounted with what is called as a root in case of Windows? C drive. C drive. C drive. C drive. Okay. So in case of Windows, C drive is the root. In case of Linux, the whatever storage is mounted with this directory, whatever storage is mounted with this directory in case of Linux, this root directory, that is called as a root storage. In case of Windows, whatever storage is mounted with that C drive, that is called as a root for Windows, right? Mac also has the same. Mac is also built on top of kind of a Linux only in the background. That iOS also, basically that iOS also has something like this also, same. So this is root. Is everyone clear what do you mean by root value? First of all, let me ask this question. Are you guys already comfortable with AWS cloud, all these concepts? Because whatever I am explaining, this is nothing to do with Terraform. When we are creating EC2 instances, in that Terraform script, you need to specify all these details. What AMI has to be used, what instance type has to be created, and in which network it has to be created, in what security group needs to be attached, what PEM file needs to be used. Those details you need to specify in the Terraform script. That's why I am explaining one more time all these concepts, AWS concepts. I hope you are already know all these things. Anyone doesn't know anything about these EC2 instances still? Because I see some people are still asking basic questions. So every EC2 instance will have a storage. Most of the cases that is EBS value. AWS that root value instead of EBS value, it can be an instance storage also. It can be instance storage also. If you go with instance storage, that is temporary storage. That is kind of a temporary storage, which means instance storage in the sense in whatever physical machine your EC2 instance is getting created, in whatever physical machine that EC2 instance is getting created, it is going to use the storage also from the same hardware. So this is the physical hardware, physical machine, physical server or bare metal server. So your EC2 instance is created on this host machine. If it is using the root value from the same host, this is called as a instance storage. This is called as a instance storage. But instance storage is temporary storage, because if that EC2 instance is created in a different host, when you stop and start the EC2, when you stop and start the EC2 instance, if the EC2 instance is created on the different host, different physical server, again it is going to use this storage, instance storage. So it is kind of a temporary storage if you guys are using instance store. But instead of instance store, EBS is a persistent storage. EBS is a persistent storage. Even though your EC2 instance is getting created on a different physical machines, right? The storage remains same. Even though that EC2 gets created in one more machine also like this, if it is stopped and start, even though it is getting created in a different host, it is going to use same storage. This is EBS storage. SAN, storage area network, persistent storage. So is everyone clear? What do you mean by that storage? So in AWS, every EC2 instance will have a value that is root value. Most of the cases it is EBS value. Any questions, any confusions or any queries here? Is everyone clear? What do you mean by AMI when it comes to EC2? Is everyone clear? What do you mean by instance type and this storage? Now, in normal computers, we call something called firewall. What is firewall? Basically, in general, firewall is a network security system that will prevent unauthorized connections, unauthorized access to that EC2 instance. So you can block the request using firewall, right? The same concept in AWS, the firewall, we call it as a security group. We call it as a security group. So when it comes to security group, that security group acts as a virtual firewall. It acts as a virtual firewall where it can allow, or block the request. Basically, we can block the request, the connection. Basically, we can block the connection to that EC2 instance using security group. Security group is basically a firewall, a virtual firewall in AWS where we can block the request or we can allow the request connection basically. So when it comes to security group, there are two things. Inbound rules, and outbound rules. When it comes to security group, right, we have something called inbound rule and outbound rule. Security group acts as a firewall, a virtual firewall attached to that EC2 instance. It's a virtual firewall attached to that EC2 instance where we can allow some network traffic to this EC2 instance. Suppose here you have something called inbound rule, inbound and outbound rules, inbound rules and outbound rules. Let me inbound rules and outbound. Outbound in the sense outgoing request, outbound request, outbound rules. Inbound in the sense incoming connections, outbound in the sense outgoing connections. So we can block the connections at the security group. So in your servers, you are going to run some process. Right? Inside your servers, you will have some process. Even SSH is also one process, guys. SSHD process will run on what port? You guys already know all these things. SSHD runs on what port? On port 22. So suppose you guys are running database in that server. Let's say you guys are running some database process like maybe MySQL or Mongo, whatever it is. Let's say you guys are running MySQL software, MySQL service. That software is running. On which port MySQL will run? 3309. So some other servers try to reach this server, try to connect this server. Some other applications or servers try to connect to these servers on this port. If the port is not allowed in the security group, in the firewall, that port is not open for that source. if this guy, if this guy is contacting, if this guy is trying to connect to this system, this guy becomes a source. If that port 22 is not opened for this source IP, is that the firewall will allow this system, this source to reach that destination, that IP on this port? If the port 22 is not allowed for this source, no. So it will act as a firewall. The security group is nothing but a firewall. The security group is nothing but a firewall. So in this security group, you have a inbound rules, you have a outbound rules, where you will open the ports for the sources to connect. Let's say if this port 22 is opened for some range like this, here in the inbound rule, your source is this one. Let's say you have opened something like this, 172.31.0.0/16, you open port 22. Now this system IP, is in a different range. Let's say this is in different IP range. Now when this guy is trying to reach this guy on port 22, is that firewall, that security group where I have opened port 22 for this source, will it allow this system to reach this system on port 22? No. So by default, all the ports are blocked in the security group. By default, nothing is opened. By default, all the ports are blocked. So it is recommended to open whatever ports which is required to open for whatever sources which is required in the security group, in the firewall. Here, it is recommended to open only for whatever sources and whatever ports you really need to open. Suppose you have some application server. Suppose you have some application servers. This is your application server, and this application, some Java based application is deployed here, and that Java based application is trying to contact database. And if this 3309 port is not opened for this system in that security group, is that application will be able to communicate with the database even though database is running in this server on that port? No. So that port has to be opened in this security group, that firewall, so that these sources can communicate with that process running in that EC2 instance. It will have an inbound rule, incoming request, outbound rule. By default, outbound rule is something like this: all traffic, all protocols, all protocol, all the sources in the sense 0.0.0.0. For outbound in the sense, this guy can contact any other server on any IP, any port, any IP, it can contact, because your outgoing is fine, but you need to focus more on the inbound traffic. So in normal computer, we call that as a firewall. In AWS, the same concept, we call it as a security group. So while creating a EC2 instance, you can assign or you can map some security group with that EC2 instance. Is everyone clear? The conceptual components of basic computers and EC2 components. What do you mean by security group? It's a firewall. EBS is a storage. AMI is an operating system. That CPU and RAM is categorized based on the instance types. Any questions, any queries here? Now, again, we have some purchasing options. EC2 purchasing options. Let me explain quickly these purchasing options. We have something called purchasing options. So we have EC2 purchasing options. One is on demand, reserved, spot instances. So we have something called on-demand EC2 instances, reserved instances, spot instances. So on-demand EC2 instances are most flexible and most expensive purchasing options. Most flexible and most expensive purchasing options. Most flexible and most expensive purchasing options. So the EC2 is chargeable. That EC2 is chargeable when the instance is running, built by hour, that EC2 instance on demand, most expensive purchasing option, at the same time most flexible purchasing option. Most expensive purchasing option and most flexible purchasing option. You are charged only when instance is running. You are charged only when instance is running, build by hour. You can provision or you can terminate instance anytime. So you can provision in the sense you can create or you can terminate the EC2 instance anytime. This is on demand, most expensive and most flexible. And AWS is offering reserved instances. AWS is offering reserved instances. It will allow us to purchase. It will allow us to purchase an instance for a set of time period, like 1 year, 3 years, like that. You will get a significant price discount. You will get a significant price discount. Once you buy the reserved instance, we are responsible for the entire period, entire time, regardless how frequently you are using. Whether you use it for 1 day, whether you use it for 10 days, that doesn't matter. You are responsible for entire that time period. But the price will be little less compared to the on demand. And you have something called spot instances. You have something called spot instances. You have something called spot instances. So Amazon sells some unused instances at less price. At less price, you can bid an instance type, and when the spot price is less compared to your bid price, AWS will allocate that spot instances. Again, spot instances will fluctuate based on the supply and demand in the market. If you need some very high configuration server, you need some high configuration server at low price for some short amount of time for doing some kind of a POC, proof of concept, R&D purpose, right? Research and development, like kind of a R&D, that POC. So you can go for a spot instances. You will get with the less amount of, for less amount of time, you will get at less price. Like this, there are purchasing options: on demand, reserved, spot. You guys created some EC2 instances already. By default, in which category the EC2 instances got created? You guys already created a lot of EC2 instances. On demand. On demand instances. You may have a question, sir, in real time again. In real time, which one we will use? On demand or reserved or spot? First of all, understand there is nothing called real time. If you guys already attended my sessions, right? I told this multiple times. There is nothing called real time. Your use case, your requirement is the real time. Your requirement is the real time. Suppose you have a forecast. Let's say you are going to use some application, you are going to deploy one application, and you have a, you forecast that that application is going to perform very well for next 3 years. You have a lot of load. Let's say you will have a lot of end users who can access that application for next 2 years or 3 years. You forecast that your application is going to perform very well. So instead of going for on-demand instances, can I go with reserved instances? Can I create a EC2 instances for a 3 years or 2 years like that? And can I start deploying my application in that reserved instances and make those applications available for my end users? Yes. But whenever there is a demand, can I scale in, scale out on-demand instances to the existing reserved instances, additional servers whenever there is a lot of load or some seasonal time you are expecting some additional load. In that case, can I add some additional EC2 instances, on-demand EC2 instances also if required? Yes. So there is nothing called real time. Understand? So people say in real time what type of services you will use, like Chandra was asking. In real time, what type of EC2 service, AWS services will be used. In real time, what type of instances will be created, in which purchasing option. There is nothing called real time. Everything is a use case. Everything is a requirement. Do you have a Chandra in the class? He dropped already. Guys, be consistent in the classes. Okay. If you not joining regularly, and again, same concept, I mean to say, I am not going to explain the same concept. In when I go and explain Terraform, I will create a resources. I will create a resources, Terraform, that AWS resources using Terraform I will create. That time, if I try to explain something like this, AMI, I am not expecting you to ask, sir, what is AMI? Because you already know EC2. When you are creating a EC2 instance, you are going to provide AMI. And you know, when I say instance type, sir, what is instance type? If you are not consistent in the classes, if you are not regularly attending or going through these things, will you guys able to understand when I am explaining or when I am writing a Terraform script like that? You may have a doubt, sir, what is this? What is this? Like that. So try to attend guys regularly, or otherwise I am expecting at least these concepts already known to you. I am going to explain Terraform after some time. That time using Terraform I am going to create a EC2 instances, not manually. But without knowing what is EC2, what components will be part of EC2, it will be difficult to understand Terraform. So that's why I am explaining all these options. So is everyone clear? What is on-demand, reserved, spot, AMIs, instance type, security groups? Now, how the charges will be applicable? How the charges will be applicable for EC2 instance? Again, various factors will be deciding the charges. So based on the purchasing options, charges may vary. Based on the instance family and type, charges will vary. And based on the AMI you are using, charges may vary. Based on the storage, how much storage you are using, the charges may vary. Based on the regions also, based on the region, not every region, will have the same charges for your services. Charges will vary, the price of the service will vary based on the region, based on the AMI, based on the EBS storage which you guys are using, based on the purchasing option, based on the instance type and family. So I already explained what is AMI. Instance type also I have explained. You have some instance families like general purpose. As I already told, balanced performance. You will get balanced CPU, balanced memory in your EC2 instances that can be used for web applications, websites, code repositories like Nexus, to deploy microservices or web applications or websites. You can use general purpose. And compute optimized, you will get a more CPU performance. More CPU performance. Like you can use if you have a requirement for batch processing, distributed analytics, right? Video encoding, these type of applications. If you want to run, you need a more computing, that more CPU performance. You can go for a compute optimized. And there is something called memory optimized. Memory optimized. In memory databases and data mining related applications where you need a large RAM, you can go for a memory optimized. Storage optimized, where you will get lot of very good IO, reading and writing the data to the storage, very good performance. You can go storage optimized instances if you want to configure NAS, NFS, network file systems, and data warehousing tools and NoSQL databases. And there is something called GPU optimized. GPU optimized, graphical cards, graphic cards, guys, graphic cards. So you can go for a GPU optimized instances when you are working on machine learning related softwares or app stream, video encoding, these type of things. You can go with a GPU optimized. Again, each family has a lot of types, T2, M4, M3, C3, C4, C, like this. There are a lot of families and types. Is everyone clear? What is instance type again? Now we discussed about security groups. We discussed already security group. That security group is nothing but a firewall. That security group is nothing but a firewall. It's a network security system that prevent to unauthorized access to that servers. Security group act as a virtual firewall that controls the traffic for one or more EC2 instance. We can add rules to each security group. We can add rules to each security group. Best practice is allow only whatever traffic that is required. Best practice is allow the traffic whatever which is required. As I already told, there is a inbound rules and there is outbound rules for that security group. And same security group can be attached, same security group can be used or attached to the multiple EC2 instances also. It's a firewall, it's a virtual firewall. Now every EC2 instance will have a IP addresses. Every EC2 instance will have a IP addresses. Every EC2 instance will have a IP addresses. There are primarily two types of IPs. Every server, not only EC2, every server will have IP addresses, private IP and public IP. So public IP is optional. It's optional. In real time, you may have a servers. You may have a servers without public IP, without internet access. In real time, you may have a servers. You may have a servers without internet, without public IP also. So public IP is used for communication with internet, for communicating with internet. So public IP is required. Public IP address is required for the instances to communicate with internet, with internet, with internet, which means the servers which are there in different network, you want to communicate the servers from internet, the public IP is required. EC2 instances can be launched. EC2 instances can be launched with or without public IP address also. Public IP is not mandatory. In real time, most of our servers will be private servers without internet, without public IP. Private IP. Private IP. By default, every EC2 instance will have a private IP address. Private IP addresses will allow servers to communicate with each other as long as they are located in the same network, they are located in the same VPC. They are located in a same VPC, same network. They don't need to use public IPs. They no need to go via internet. As long as the servers are in same VPC, same intranet, same private network, they can communicate with each other using private IPs. They don't need a public IP. And the default behavior of public IP, the default behavior of public IP is, if you stop the server and if you start the server, the public IP will change. The public IP will change. Public IPs are assigned or managed by ISP, Internet Service Providers. Suppose if you need a static public IP, there is one more service in AWS. There is one more service in AWS that we call it as a elastic IP. So if you need a static public IP for EC2 instance, even after stopping and starting the server, you don't want your public IP to be changed, then you can go for a elastic IP. Elastic IP. So when we are creating EC2 instance, internally you are going to use multiple services. Internally, you are going to use multiple services when you are creating EC2. Internally, we are using EBS, we are using VPC also. When we are creating EC2, internally we are using EBS. This EBS is what? This EBS is for what? Storage. And VPC, why we are using VPC? VPC is basically a network. VPC is basically a network. When we are creating a EC2 instance, you need to select or specify under which VPC, under which network you want to create that EC2 instance. Even though you don't specify, you have not created, by default there is a VPC. Default VPC is created for us. Whenever you create a AWS account, there is a default VPC created for us in that regions. So our EC2 instance will get created in that default VPC. And again, this EC2, you need to specify AMI, you need to specify instance type, you need to specify security group, you need to specify something called key pair. These are some inputs which you are giving for EC2 while creating a EC2 instance. So is everyone clear? What are the components of EC2? Internally, what other services are used when you are creating a EC2? Theoretically, is everyone clear what is EC2? Is everyone clear theoretically what is EC2? EC2 is a virtual machine in AWS cloud. It's a virtual server. It's a VM. Can I use that VM for whatever use cases I have? Can I use that EC2 instance to run my application as an application server I can use, or I can use to run my database process, or I can use that EC2 instance to run a web server, or I can use that EC2 instance to configure CI/CD software also, like a Jenkins or Nexus or JFrog or SonarQube. Can I use that EC2 instance for any purpose as per my requirement? That can be application server, database server, web server, or that can be a CI/CD process. Yes. Now I can create these services, not only EC2. I can create these services many ways. One is GUI, another one is CLI, another one is API, another one is SDK, and other developmental tools. That is IAC, infrastructure as a code tools. In case of AWS, there is something called cloud formation. it is cloud specific. This is cloud specific. Cloud formation is a cloud specific. You can use cloud formation to create and manage the only AWS resources. Or can I go with the cloud agnostic tools like Terraform also? Terraform also, that infrastructure as a code, yes. Not only EC2 guys, any other cloud service, like EBS, VPC, load balancers, EKS clusters or S3 buckets or RDS instances, whatever you want to create, that can be created manually using GUI. Manually using GUI. What do you mean by this GUI? In case of AWS, can I consider AWS console as a GUI, graphical user interface? Yes. So we discussed what are the challenges with manual. In the first session, in the demo, Terraform demo, I have explained, if we are creating the resources manually, do you have a chances for human errors? If you are, while creating a EC2 instance, right, if you guys are manually creating, you miss to reuse same security group, or you miss to configure some storage or some network or some security group. When you are trying to create another environment, kind of a QA environment, again you are creating manually, do have a chances for human errors. You may miss to do something which will lead to the human errors, and again it will bring the inconsistency. So instead of manually creating using console or CLI, or instead of writing a complex code, I no need to write a complex code. Can I go for an infrastructure as a code tools like Terraform, where I can define my infrastructure as a code in a declarative way? That is why Terraform is used. But without knowing these services, right, you can write the Terraform code, but will you able to understand what you are doing, why you are providing that AMI ID security group, VPC, like that? No. So that's why first I am refreshing all these concepts. Then first I will manually create these resources. First I will manually create these resources using GUI. Then you can easily understand the Terraform script when I am going to define same thing in a declarative way using Terraform. So is everyone clear theoretically what is EC2? Any questions, any queries still you have in EC2? Let me know. If you still have any questions, queries in EC2, let me know. If you don't have any questions or queries, I will manually create this EC2 instance tomorrow. In tomorrow session, I will create this EC2 instance manually using console, using GUI. While creating EC2, I will explain I will walk through again. What do you mean by this key pair? What do you mean by this security group, instance type, AMIs? I will walk through this again tomorrow quickly, and then I will create that EC2 instance manually using GUI. Later, once we learn this EC2, later I will explain storage services. I will cover storage services. We have some storage services in AWS. As per the syllabus, I will be covering EBS and S3. As per the syllabus, I will be covering EBS and S3 as part of the storage services. Tomorrow, once we are done with EC2, we will start understanding about EBS and S3 also. That's it for today, guys. Tomorrow, we will go for lab. We'll go for a lab manually. Once I explain all these AWS resources, whatever I have explained as part of the syllabus, right? In the syllabus, I have given some AWS services which we are going to discuss. Once I discuss all those AWS services, and once I explain how to create manually, later we will understand Terraform. What is Terraform? How to write a Terraform script? What do you mean by provider? What do you mean by resource? What do you mean by metadata, that attributes, loops, functions, variables, all those things we will learn later. Okay. Thank you, guys. That's it for today. I'll continue tomorrow. with the EC2 lab using AWS console. But before coming to tomorrow's session, if you still don't have AWS account, if you still don't have AWS account, kindly create an AWS account and let me know. If you are not able to create, we will try to help you. Let me know if you are still not able to create, we will help you. If you have any specific question, feel free to unmute and ask. Another 5 minutes is there. If you want to unmute and ask some questions, feel free to unmute and ask. Anyone has a question? Kindly unmute and ask. Otherwise, I'll stop the session here today. I'll continue tomorrow. How can we know how much memory is selected for a project? How much you need first of all, Basuraj, right? How much you need first of all? That is depends on what? I hope you are already know DevOps, right? What do you mean by application? If you guys, what do you mean by virtualized deployment? What do you mean by containerized deployment? So first of all, how much memory you need, that is depends on what? Just now I told, right? How you are going to decide what instance type needs to be selected? How do you decide what instance type needs to be selected? I mean to say, how much CPU, how much memory? How do you know, or how do you decide first of all? That is based on what type of software, what type of software you need to run on that system, right? What type of software you need to run on that system. So as per that you will select. As per that you will select. And again, not only just that software, and within that software you may run some applications also, based on how much your application is going to consume whenever there is a lot of load, peak load. In the peak load, how much CPU, how much memory your application requires, along with that software. Based on that you will select your instance types. And again, how many servers you need for that application also, based on the load only. How many customers, how many end users you have for that application, how much request, how many requests you are expecting for that application, non-functional requirements you will have, right? You may say the business may say there will be kind of a 50,000 requests comes to my application per day, or they may say 1 lakh request may come to my application per day, or maybe they'll say 10,000 requests may come to my application per hour. If that much request, that much load is coming to your application, do you need to make sure your applications are highly available, your databases also highly available and able to support that much load also? Yes, based on that, you will create a number of servers. You will do the reverse proxy, that load balancing, so that load will be distributed to your multiple servers. Your servers will have enough capacity, enough memory. That is how you will design the infrastructure. Guys, this is nothing to do with the Terraform. Whatever you guys are asking, this is nothing to do with Terraform. Again, Terraform, as per your requirement, whatever infrastructure you want to create, you can create in a declarative way. Software means, what is this CRG? You are asking software means. Can I consider Tomcat as a software? Can I consider Jenkins as a software? Can I consider MySQL as a software? Not only these softwares, you developed one application, your own application. Can I consider that application also as a software only? You are building your own application for your end users. That is also a software. You are developing a software application to address some problems. That is basically a software. That can be your application, or that can be a database. That is also one application software. This MySQL is also one application, that is database software, database application. Any questions still you have? If not, thank you guys. That's it for today. I'll continue tomorrow with the EC2 lab. Okay, guys, this is not a DevOps course where I am not going to explain what is Tomcat, what is Jenkins, what is Nexus, what is Docker, what is Kubernetes. This is AWS with Terraform. So I am going to explain only Terraform concepts and AWS resources, whatever we need to discuss to get started with Terraform. Okay. If you don't know what is Tomcat, what is Jenkins, what is Docker, what is Kubernetes, this is not the course for you. Here, Terraform is infrastructure as a code tool. Using Terraform, you can create a resources that can be a cloud resources like a server, storage, networks, load balancers. So I am going to explain what do you mean by that resources and how to manually create and how to automatically create using Terraform. That is the scope of this program, Terraform with AWS. It is nothing to do with other tools like Docker, Kubernetes, Jenkins, Nexus. That will not be discussed here. Okay. Thank you. I'll continue tomorrow.
Thank you, sir.